Hi everyone, this is SherLuc, and today we're going to be seeing how to cast a draft. So, the first two things that you need to know is that on one, there is no right way to cast a draft. Each duo of casters have their own styles, have their own likings and preferences. Neither of them are bad or good. They just have advantages and disadvantages. So it is very important to discuss about the draft specifically with your duo when you want to be casting, because you want to know what the roles will be, what you want to talk about, and what you want to pay attention to. Now, the second thing you need to know is that draft is something that is very specific to the situation in which you're casting. So, for example, if you cast a tournament and you know about the teams, then you can actually make predictions about some certain picks because, simply put, players have their champion pools and you know about them. If you're in another situation where you do not know the players, and instead you may be referring to meta picks, for example. Well, that makes it a lot more difficult because then players default to their champion pools, and you feel like an idiot saying, "Oh, hey, Samira is OP, but no one plays Samira in the lobby," and so it gets completely ignored, for example. So it is very important to assert the situation in which you're in to properly address the draft. Now, what we want to know is that there are multiple roles in a draft, two to be specific. The first one is the one who sets expectations. The second one is the one who explains. So usually it's the PvP who wants to set up expectations and the colorcaster who wants to explain. We're going to be proceeding slowly throughout this video for a very boring draft with a surprising last pick in the end. Okay, so first thing you need to know as the draft progresses is the ban phase, right? So we have first rotation of the bans. We don't care about these. These are usually going to be always the same depending on the teams and the players. So if you have an Anivia one trick, don't be super excited because Anivia is getting banned. Now, you can also play on the opposite of that, saying, "Hey, we have an Anivia one trick on one side, and Anivia is not banned." You don't want to spend a lot of time talking about the bans simply because they are banned. You're not gonna see them in draft, right? There's no point in talking about Anivia and how she's super good, or how this player, for example, is super proficient on Anivia, simply because you're not going to see him play. It's not going to happen. So stop talking about it. Now, what we want to focus around instead is going to be the first pick. First pick is going to be really important because it's going to settle the identity of blue drafts. So if this is a flex pick, we want to highlight that possibility. Okay, so if, for example, Pantheon gets locked in for blue side, you want to highlight that this Pantheon can go anywhere. It can go support, top, jungle, mid even. Could even be played AD carry depending on the support. So lots of possibilities, and you already put some pressure onto red side to respond. Now, of course, ban is going to unfold this way, right? With red 3, red 5, and red 4 and red 5 being picked separately, and b4, b5. And in between, bans. So you don't want to pay attention to first ban rotation. Remember, only for the champions that do slip through these bans. Now you get to blue one, right? You talk about blue one, highlight it as maybe one of the power picks that slipped through the draft. If the one trick Anivia, for example, is on blue side, then maybe they are going to be locking Anivia here. That's something you want to talk about. Now, blue side is picked. If that's a flex pick, don't waste too much time onto it, because if you explain how Pantheon top lane is super strong, blah blah blah, and it ends up going mid or support, you're going to feel very stupid. Instead, what you want to focus around in the early draft is this: red 1, red 2, and b2, b3. Because red 1, red 2, hard to pronounce for me, is the identity of the red 1 draft, right? It's what you want to focus around. So let's say We have Pantheon here, and then we have Syndra, Elise picked up in response here. Now that is something very interesting because you have two champions that are very offensive, and that's something you can uh, that's something you can play around in your draft. Usually, these two picks will have a common identity, and you can use that identity to lead you through the rest of red side draft. B2B3, you have to put them in contrast with these picks because B2B3 is a response to R1 R2. So do not just be highlighting the picks like saying, "Oh yeah, well, Talia, for example, is a very good jungler." You don't want to talk about that. Instead, you want to talk about how Talia is good into Syndra Elise. Because if you do cast a lot of games, if you only focus around the picks in themselves, you're going to be repeating yourself a lot. Every single draft where Talia will be picked, you will be saying the same things. Where instead, if you put her in contrast with the picks that are on the opposite side, you will always be talking about Talia, but every time in a different way, making your draft cast very interesting. Now, as Talia, as this is for the explanation part. For the setting up expectation, if Syndra is locked in, you have to think about a champion that goes well with Syndra, for example. So let's say you have no idea. Well, you can always rely on to the very basics. If Soul Laner AD or if Soul Laner AP, then look for jungler with other type of damage. So let's say Syndra is getting locked in. You want to say, hmm, now with that Syndra, something would go really well, like Olaf or Xinjiao, I believe. Always also look in the champion pool of the jungler to make relevant points, right? Because if that guy doesn't play Olaf or Xinjiao, you don't want to be talking about it. Same goes for Talia here. If Talia gets locked in, your expectations to say, okay, Talia can go with Pantheon, but if it doesn't, let's say this is Aatrox instead, um, something that could go well with Talia would be Pantheon, or something with setup. If you don't know a specific champion, you can always go for very larger themes, like, oh yeah, Talia, she loves setup, she loves point and click CC. Okay, something with point and click CC should come here. And if that is the case, let's say Pantheon, Twisted Fate gets locked in here, you sound smart. Now, you don't want to talk too much about Red 3 simply because you have all of the second ban phase to talk about it, okay? Once again, we don't want to spend too much time talking about bans on the second ban rotation. We just want to maybe highlight them. Like, okay, Cassiopeia is going to join the bench. We're not going to be seeing Camille on this draft either. That's about it. So once again, you don't talk much about these bans. Instead, you can talk about the latest pick, and how it's going to influence this pick. So let's say the draft has gone through, so we're going through first ban rotation. We get onto Pantheon, yeah, blah blah, flex pick, blah blah blah. Syndra might have an AD jungler. Oh, look, it's Elise instead. How surprising is that? Now, onto here, Talia. Oh, Talia is interesting into these champions, and also she loves to have setup next to her. So, oh look, setup. Now onto here, and that's where we stop talking about our 3 pick. Instead, we talk about the draft in total, saying, oh, I really like this draft from Blue Side. It has a lot of roaming with like 3 globals. I also like this, maybe, let's say, something completely random comes up here, uh, like this. Say, oh, I really like this here because it has lots of magic damage, so it gives you a lot of agency for blocking AD picks on the next to it. Oh, but they don't have supports yet. Yeah, Kaisa, she loves to have Nautilus next to her, so maybe you're gonna see Nautilus here, and yeah, maybe Kaisa also likes Braum, so that could be a possibility for bans as well. And if not, here you see Nautilus or Braum, right? Now let's say it's Nautilus instead. Now you do sound smart for predicting picks, but then we're entering terminal phase of the draft, and that's where it's really important. B4, B5, and R5, especially R5. So B4, B5 are the two picks that are getting locked one after the other that have to round up this identity. Because blue side is always about drafting an identity. So not only this, but also blue is about countering these picks. So you can either play on the identity side or you can play on the counter side. Now let's say this is Talia jungle, Pantheon mid, Pantheon top, and Twisted Fate, blah blah. We have Kai'Sa Nautilus being locked in here, and now what we need too is something with maybe lots of protection and some disengaging abilities. So let's say we have Bard and we have Xayah. Now you have two accesses to talk about these two picks, right? Because you can either relate them to the first three picks, saying, "Oh, Bard also gets in the global aspect of the team with his Tempered Fate, and I really like as well the Xayah and the Bard bringing a lot of CC for Pantheon, Twisted Fate, and Talia to work. Very nice composition, mixed damage as well, which is cool because we have mixed damage here. And you can also play into the, oh, but guess what? Bard and Xayah are very good against diving team comp, and very good with self-healing abilities and a lot of denial of a lot of threat denial for what's on the enemy side, right? So there are two axes to talk about during this stage. Now, you don't want to last too long about that because R5 is about to come in. And R5 is the big pick, right? R5 is what will switch your team to from what could switch a team from maybe a boring composition to something that is suddenly super exciting. So if you see something really weird like a Nasus, for example, you're like, wait, how is Nasus even going to work here? And then gets thrown in the mid lane and have Syndra play top lane against Pantheon, and you're like, wow, we didn't see that coming at all. And this is fine, because you have 3 minutes of spectator delay to talk about it. And so all of the all of the the parts where you're talking about draft identity, team comp, saying which one is stronger than which one, giving your predictions, this all goes into the 3 minutes. Okay? Now, next thing you have to know is you want to be able to you want to be able to this is all about explanation. Now, for setting up, remember, you want to set up B1 as maybe a power pick. You want to set up expectations for R2 regarding R1. You want to set up expectations regarding B3, and now you want to set up expectations regarding R4 with R3 and the second ban rotation saying, yeah, we have Kai'Sa here. Kai'Sa likes to be paired with this or that, or maybe there's a big pick that is a counter to this, right? Like Nocturne, for example. And we know that top laner plays Elise and that jungler plays Nocturne. So yeah, it could be Elise top lane and have Nocturne switch into jungle. It would be a really good counter. You want to set expectations as much as possible. And the thing is that setting expectations can also be done not only with the picks but also with the player's op.gg. So for the play-by-play who doesn't have much knowledge about the game, it's not a big deal. You just have to know the champion pools, and you have to say, okay, top laner plays he played a couple of Nasus. He plays a lot of Darius, so we're probably gonna be seeing Darius here. It could be some things that you can do. For the play-by-play, you can also ask questions during the draft, saying, What would you think of Nasus in that composition? What would you think? Say top laner plays a lot of Darius. What do you think about Darius? Would that be a great champion? Or what do you think so far of this or that champion? It's fine for the PvP to not be very active in draft, but it is important for the caster to be able to talk about these picks. And so, let's say now, here comes a pick that you don't know anything about. For example, Ivern. Now, Ivern comes in, and you're like, uh, I don't know, Ivern. It's nothing. You don't need to worry about that because what you really want to focus on is maybe the rest of the comp, and then you can put Ivern in that identity. So if there's a pick you don't know, discard it. Talk about the rest of the draft. Say, Elise with Syndra and with Kai'Sa. Elise start with Kai'Sa, Nautilus, that sort of things. Makes up for like very threatening dives, a lot of engage, a lot of long distance stuns that you can rely on, and all you need is all you need is to output damage next. Then you add Ivern, and you say, okay, how does Ivern play into that? And you can say, so we said we wanted damage. One thing that Ivern does is shielding, right? So if you get shielded, you have way more. You have much more time to output damage. So that's one thing. Now Ivern brings also the brushes, the vision. Um, how does that play with the stuns? Well, just imagine you're walking next to a brush, and you can't actually walk safely past a brush because any moment there's a cocoon, there's a scatter the weak, or a hook or a dredge line that comes out of that brush and engages you and catches you. There, done. You've talked about Ivern without having to know anything about the pick, except for the spells, of course. Now, this was my technique for talking about the drafts. We will be going more in depth about that later on in the series once you have a lot more knowledge. In the meantime, I hope this helped you a lot. Please leave some commentaries if you have tips in the description. If you have tips in the comments. Um, if there is any improvement that I can make to these videos, also feel free to contribute to it in the comments. I will be reading them. Thank you all for watching. Have a good one.